Hi everyone, and welcome to Horror Spectator. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We dive deep into the darkest, most chilling real-life horror stories out there. And if you're a returning viewer, I'm so glad to have you back, friend. In this video, we're exploring two stories of people who were inside their homes in the Appalachian Mountains and went through moments that, in my opinion, are truly terrifying. Stories that take place inside the home, where peace and comfort are suddenly shattered, are some of my favorites, because they're the ones that scare me the most. I hope you feel the same. I also want to say that I'm working on something new for the channel, and I'll try to share more about it as early as next week. Stay tuned for that. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's head back into the mountains. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, on the Pennsylvania side, in a place where isolation wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was just how things were. Our house sat far from anything you'd call a town. And from a young age, I helped my parents with everything. Hauling wood, fixing pipes, dealing with winters that felt endless. So living off the grid was never something that scared me. If anything, it felt normal. Later, when I went to college and tried city life, I realized pretty quickly it wasn't for me. Too much noise, too many people, and a constant feeling of being watched in a way that felt artificial. So once I finished school and had enough financial stability to choose where I wanted to live, I went looking for something familiar, which is how I ended up near the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was an area where I'd done several hikes and camped a few times before, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was also a place full of legends and strange stories. But nothing I wasn't already used to, since the area where I grew up was exactly the same. The cabin was cheap, isolated, and had clearly been empty for a long time. But structurally it was solid, and that mattered more to me than appearances. I moved in knowing it would take work, and for about a year that's exactly what my life was. Work during the day online, and then fixing the place in the evenings and on weekends. I was constantly tired, constantly focused on what needed repairing next, and honestly not very attentive to small details. Looking back, I think that's why I didn't question certain things when they first started happening. At first, it was nothing specific, just moments where I'd pause and think something felt off. Sometimes there was a smell inside the house that didn't belong to me or anything I owned. Something earthy and stale, like damp clothes left too long in a closed space. Once or twice, I noticed dirt on the kitchen floor, even though I was careful about taking my boots off at the door. Another time I found footprints near the back of the house, not clear enough to be alarming. I told myself I was exhausted, distracted, probably forgetting things, and since my gut never screamed danger, I let it go. Once the major repairs were done and I finally had time to slow down, that's when I started noticing patterns. Food would run out faster than it should have, not dramatically, just enough to make me stop and count days in my head. Whenever I left the house for more than a few hours, whether to go into town or visit my parents, I'd come back to that same strange smell, stronger than before, like someone else had been there and left recently. The house still felt quiet though, and that almost made it worse, because nothing was obviously wrong. I actually started to doubt whether that was just the smell of the house itself, something I only noticed after being away for long periods of time. I'll admit that because of that, I began doing deep cleaning sessions. Not just in the house, but also with my clothes, the way I washed them and stored them. I even started showering more often. At one point, I genuinely thought it might be my own smell, the smell of me and my house. Then one night I woke up suddenly, fully alert in a way that didn't make sense. And I knew immediately that I wasn't alone. It wasn't a feeling or an instinct, it was certainty. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw something in the corner of the bedroom. A shape that didn't belong there. And the longer I stared, the more obvious it became that it was a person standing completely still. There was a moment where neither of us moved. And in that silence, I realized they knew I was awake. I think it was the most paralyzing moment of my life. It was like my whole body wanted to react, like it was twisting itself with fear. But my brain couldn't take control, couldn't make me do anything at all. It was only when the other person shifted slightly that I think my brain finally unfroze and reacted. I lunged out of bed and went straight at the figure, driven by panic more than logic. And there was a brief, chaotic struggle before they broke free and ran out of the room and out of the house entirely. I stood there shaking, listening to footsteps fade into the woods. And that's when it hit me. That same smell, strong and unmistakable. The exact one I'd been noticing for months. In that moment, everything clicked into place, and I understood that this hadn't been a single intrusion. It had been happening for a long time. I tore the house apart after that, checking every corner. The attic, the basement, crawl spaces. Anywhere a person could hide, convinced I'd find signs of someone living there. But I found nothing. No bedding, no trash, nothing that made sense. I spent days in a complete nightmare. I honestly felt like I was sinking. It wasn't until I started exploring the land around the cabin that I found the cave, hidden by brush and close enough to the house that it made my stomach drop. It looked abandoned, but inside there were clear signs that someone had been using it recently. I had never noticed that cave before, but I had also never been specifically looking for it. The entrance was partially hidden by another rock formation, and I think that gave it the perfect kind of cover. You would only see it if you were actively searching for something. Even so, it wasn't the cave that really scared me. It didn't belong to me, and I had no intention of chasing someone away from a place they might be using as shelter. What terrified me was the idea that this person could get into my house whenever they wanted, and I had no idea how. I even thought about waiting there for them, but after several nights keeping watch near the entrance, no one ever showed up. The days kept feeling like a nightmare, and I kept doing more and more intense searches around the house. Then one day, I came across a YouTube video about false walls, structures that look like solid walls, but are actually doors. That had to be it. But how? And why? I kept searching, almost frantically. Eventually, I noticed a section of the basement wall that had been sealed off. Not professionally, just enough to look permanent at a glance. And when I opened it, I realized it connected directly toward the cave system. Whoever had been watching me, whoever had been inside my home, hadn't broken in. They'd been coming and going unseen the entire time. Once again, it was a mix of terror and relief. The thought that I had spent so many nights with someone watching me was horrifying. At the same time, it was a huge relief to think that I had finally figured it out, that it wasn't going to happen again. But then another problem came up. Why was the cave connected to the house in the first place? And why had the previous owner never mentioned it? Did he not know either? I tried to contact him, but I never managed to get a response. I sealed that wall properly, reinforced everything I could, replaced locks, reinforced doors and windows. And for the past 6 months, nothing else has happened. No smells, no missing food, no sounds in the night. On paper, everything is fine, but the feeling never came back. The sense that this was my home, that I was safe here, disappeared completely. Now, every quiet night feels heavy, and every corner feels like it remembers something I'd rather forget. I can't shake the idea that the house is part of the cave. A lot of nights I have nightmares where I'm trapped inside it with no way out, and someone is watching me even though I can't see them. I know they're there. I can feel it, but I never actually see them. I wake up soaked in sweat, still scared that I'm not alone in the house, even though rationally I know that I am. I'm seriously thinking about selling the place and starting over somewhere else. Because once you realize someone shared your space without you knowing, once you accept that you were watched while you slept, that place never really feels like yours again. The problem is, I would never do to someone else what they potentially did to me. I'm gonna have to be honest about what happened and show that the house is connected to the cave. I know I could probably still sell it, but it would be for almost nothing. So far, I've been trying to hold on for as long as I can, but eventually my body is going to give in to the sleepless nights and fear, and I'm going to have to make a serious decision about the house. The story I'm about to tell you started more than 30 years ago, and it's something that unfolded slowly over time. I'll do my best to explain everything as clearly as I can, even though, to this day, I don't know exactly what really happened. It may all sound like a series of frightening coincidences to someone on the outside, but to someone who lived through it the way I did, it was much more than that. I've lived around these mountains my whole life, close enough to the Smoky Mountains to feel them every day, but still technically on the Appalachian side. In one of those places that doesn't really feel like it belongs anywhere else. It's not deep wilderness, not completely cut off, but it's also not somewhere people just pass through. My house sits a few minutes by car from the main village, maybe half an hour on foot if the weather's good, and around it there are only about 10 or 11 other houses. The village itself barely reaches 500 people, which means everyone knows everyone, or at least thinks they do. Behind my house, though, there's nothing but forest. Dense, quiet forest that feels older than anything else around it. Growing up there, that forest was just part of life. You don't really question it when you're a kid. You just accept that it's always there, watching in its own way. I didn't have many friends as a child. There simply weren't many kids. So I spent a lot of time alone. And when you're alone that much, your imagination fills the gaps. I made up stories in my head. A lot of those stories revolved around the things I could see from my bedroom window, especially my neighbor. His house was attached to ours, almost like a shared wall. And even as a kid, I knew he was off. Not in an obvious way. Not something you could point to and explain, but he had habits that never quite sat right with me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, 4 in the morning sometimes, and see him leaving his house with a large bag, heading straight into the forest. Other nights, I'd hear dragging sounds, metal scraping, things being moved when everything else was completely quiet. He'd disappear for hours and come back just as the sun was rising. As a kid, that kind of thing feeds your imagination whether you want it to or not. I started telling myself stories about him, that he was dangerous, that he was doing something horrible out there in the woods. At school, when we were asked to write short stories, those ideas slipped out onto paper. Once, my parents were even called in because a teacher thought my writing was too dark for my age. My parents brushed it off, told everyone I just had a vivid imagination. And they told me the same thing at home. They said the neighbor was harmless and I needed to leave him alone. That is to say, it's not that I truly believed he was capable of killing people. I could tell my stories apart from reality. Still, looking back now, I know it was instinct. I knew something was wrong with him. In fact, several people knew, but no one ever talked about it. Especially the adults, too busy with their own lives to notice the same things I did. They all repeated the same phrase, the same excuse, that he was just odd, but I knew it was more than that. When I was in my early 20s, my parents died in a car accident during a snowstorm. The road iced over, visibility was terrible, and they went off the mountain. Losing them like that broke something in me. For almost 3 years, I barely left the house. I worked when I had to, slept when I could, and spent a lot of nights staring out the window again, watching the forest, and, without really meaning to, watching my neighbor. That's when it stopped being imagination and started feeling more like an obsession. Another one of my obsessions, one I truly believed was more than just coincidence, was the news about people who went missing in the Smoky Mountains or in the forests nearby. They were always tourists, often alone, who vanished without leaving a trace. I started collecting every piece of news I could find about those people. Even so, there were far fewer reports than the number of people who actually disappeared, as if there was some kind of fear around making it public. One night, I woke up to a scream, sharp and sudden, like a man yelling in pain. I wasn't sure at first if I was dreaming, so I checked the time. It was 3:30 in the morning. I didn't turn on any lights. I just moved slowly to the window and looked outside. The only light on in my neighbor's house was the one in the basement. I stayed awake after that, listening. I heard noises coming from his place, heavy movements, something like cutting or chopping. I told myself to stay inside, to mind my own business. But after an hour of lying there with my heart racing, I did something stupid. I went outside and waited in my backyard, hidden by the trees, because I knew, from years of watching, that he would eventually leave. And he did. I followed him into the forest, keeping my distance, trying to stay quiet even though my legs were shaking the whole time. We walked for almost an hour, deeper than I'd ever gone at night, until he reached a small structure tucked away between the trees, something that looked like an old hunting cabin. He went inside without turning on any lights. I crept closer and tried to look through one of the windows, but it was too dark to see much. And then I stepped on a branch. The sound felt impossibly loud. Inside the cabin, I saw movement, and I swear he turned toward the window. I didn't wait to see more. I just ran blindly through the forest toward my house, tripping, gasping for air, convinced every second that I'd hear footsteps behind me. I don't remember hearing any, but I also know I was too panicked to be sure. For days after that, I waited for him to confront me, to knock on my door, to do something. Nothing happened. until the night my back door broke in. I woke up to the sound of wood cracking, and I knew immediately that someone was inside my house. My first thought wasn't maybe, it was certainty. I was convinced it was him. Years of watching, years of fear, all of it crashed down on me at once. When I was a kid, my mother had taught us about hiding. Her brother had been beaten during a break-in when she was young, and it left her deeply paranoid about home invasions, especially living somewhere so isolated. Together, my parents created 3 hiding spots around the house, depending on where you were when something happened. One of them was in my room, a hidden hatch above my closet, completely invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Only my parents and I knew about it. I climbed up there silently, phone in my hand, and called for help. I couldn't speak, not really, but I gave my address, explained someone had broken in. The operator told me a patrol car would be there in 23 minutes. 23 minutes is an eternity when you're hiding above your own bedroom, listening to someone move through your house. I heard footsteps, drawers opening, doors slamming. I heard him enter my room. He searched everything, even the closet directly beneath me. I covered my mouth with my hand because my breathing was so loud I was sure he could hear it. Whoever it was moved frantically, like they were angry, frustrated, like they knew I was there but couldn't find me. Then, just before the police arrived, he left. The house was destroyed. Things thrown everywhere. Clear signs someone had been looking for something. Or someone. I told the police everything about my neighbor, about the cabin, about his habits. They investigated, but they found nothing. No evidence. No reason to suspect him. To them, he was just a man with strange routines. I knew better. Or at least I believed I did. I also knew that the time between me following him and the break-in was enough for him to clean up anything that might have existed. Whether that was true or not, I'll never know. I couldn't stay there anymore. I called my cousin, explained everything, and that same morning I left with only the essentials. I moved away and never really came back. Over the years, I returned twice, always with him, never alone. I'm telling this story now because 2 weeks ago, I went back again to deal with paperwork. While I was there, another neighbor told me the man next door had died, found alone in his house, in his 70s. Now, I don't know what to think. Part of me believes I was right all along. Another part wonders if I let my childhood fears grow into something they never should have been. I don't know if that break-in was connected to him at all, or if it was just a coincidence that destroyed my sense of safety forever. What I do know is that I've never felt truly safe in a house since. No matter where I live, I still create hiding spots. I still listen too closely at night. And even now, with him gone, I don't know if I'll ever feel ready to go back and call that place home again.